Broadcasting live from Lothal. Good morning, Lothal. It's the Unofficial Star Wars Rebels podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Good Morning, Lothal, the Unofficial Star Wars Rebels podcast. I'm Pete Salas, along with
Rolando Zamora.
What's going on, Rolly? How we doing?
I'm good. How are you, man?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. I'm ready to rock with getting back on track and actually recapping some Rebels, talking some real Rebels this week. So how about you?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, man. As I was recapping this episode, I was like, first of all, it felt like I had to stretch to get back into the rhythm of recapping the episode. But once I got into the rhythm, I was like, it's like the same feeling every time I watch Rebels. I'm like, man, I love this show. And that's because this episode was we'll get into it. But nonetheless, the feel of watching a Rebels episode, I don't know how to describe it. For me, it just gets me hyped. It's just done so well. I know I'm basically, hyping Rebels every single time on this show. But I guess after being on hiatus from it for a few weeks, it really brought me back to why this is my favorite Star Wars entity. Although I feel like Andor's starting to challenge that a bit, but we'll get into that.
Oh, okay. It's a bold statement, but yes, we will get into that. We will get into that today. On today's episode, we will be talking about season 2, episode 8, and it was called Blood Sisters. But before we get into anything else, I want to remind everybody to please rate, subscribe, and share this show just with anybody that you can. Please help us out, and I'm going to ask you every single episode, and that's what I just did. So before we get into talking any Star Wars Rebels, Rolly, what's happening around the galaxy?
Let's see what's happening this week in Star Wars.
Okay, so this week in Star Wars, I don't know if any of you guys heard, a lot of the toy collectors out there I'm sure did, Hasbro PulseCon happened this past weekend. So besides Star Wars, there was a lot of, Hasbro items, Transformers, Magic the Gathering, which is a huge part of my life.
Right.
There was a lot of cool stuff that was revealed this weekend, but we're here to talk about Star Wars, so we're just going to focus on that. And of course, as you guys know, if you're a Star Wars toy collector, that's basically going to mean two things: Black Series and Vintage Collection. Mm-hmm. So for Black Series, they revealed some cool figures, starting with the Andor series. They revealed figures for Cassian Andor himself, Lothal, Bix Kayleen, and Mon Mothma. If you guys have not touched base with Andor or watched it, some of those names might be a bit unfamiliar to you. So I would recommend you get on that because you're missing out. Trust me. Another cool figure that I was kind of excited for that got released, or that got announced rather, was the Black Series Mandalorian Season 2 Axe Woves. You guys will remember him as the third Mandalorian, not named Sasha Banks and Bo-Katan.
Right, exactly.
Or Casca Reeves, as she's referred to in the Star Wars universe. But it was cool. I was kind of excited for this one because a few months ago they dropped a regular Death Watch Mandalorian, and I was like, well, I don't think they're going to release that character. I already had Bo-Katan and Casca Reeves, so I got that one, and that's just kind of supposed to be that guy. But now he's released, so that trifecta of those 3 Mandalorians that showed up in season 2, it will be complete for me after I pick him up. And the last thing they revealed is Return of the Jedi is actually going to be celebrating its 40th anniversary in 2023. So they're putting out some figures to celebrate that. And one of them is going to be an Imperial Scout Trooper.
Nice.
The Endor version of Han, and the Endor version of Princess Leia as well, along with Wicket, who you guys remember is the main Ewok that's kind of featured. I don't think he was ever given the name Wicket in Return of the Jedi until the Ewok movies came out, which is a whole nother side of Star Wars. And the Lando version from the Jabba's palace in Return of the Jedi, where he's kind of in disguise. So those are some really cool figures that got announced for Hasbro PulseCon. And then not to leave out the vintage collection, I don't collect vintage collection myself.
Me either.
Yeah, but in case you guys are a bit unfamiliar with that, that's kind of like your more standard, I forget the size of the figure, but basically kind of like the G.I. Joes and such from back in the day.
Right.
These are not the Black Series are kind of like oversized figures, so They're pretty cool, but nonetheless, in the Vintage Collection, there was some really cool stuff that got announced. One of them was the complete Cantina band.
Oh wow!
From A New Hope. I thought that was really cool, even for somebody that doesn't collect Vintage Collection. I think that's something that I'm going to be looking into picking up. I think that's like a really cool display setup you can almost put in any part of your Star Wars collection.
Yeah, no kidding.
And then of course we have Cassian Andor, also in Vintage Collection, to go along with his Black Series release. We have Hunter from the Bad Batch, who's the main Bad Batcher, so to say. And then a new character that barely debuted in this week's episode of Andor, Vel Sartha. She's kind of one of the rebel cell leaders that Cassian is put onto her team by Lothal. So I'm sure we're going to get more in depth on her character in these next couple episodes as they're going to drop on Andor. So that was kind of the only relatively big news in Star Wars this week. So I do want to get into some birthdays that we are also celebrating. First, we have Indira Varma, September 27th. She plays Tala in Obi-Wan Kenobi. You might also remember her as I don't remember her name in Game of Thrones, but she was the Sand Sisters' mother, Oberyn Martell's wife. Again, here we're playing that 5 or 6 degrees of Star Wars. Din Djarin's wife in Game of Thrones.
Right, that's the best way to put it for this audience.
Also the same day, September 27th, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, Kerry Hiroyuki Tagawa. And this is a character that we have not seen yet in Rebels, but he plays Sabine's father, Ulrich Wren, in Star Wars Rebels. He will be featured in a future episode or two, and we'll get there when we cross that path. So, a bit of a spoiler there. Sabine has parents in Star Wars Rebels. Can't say the same for our boy Ezra.
No,
which is kind of,
too
not to get
soon.
too dark.
Too soon.
We have a Sabine episode today, actually, but we haven't gotten too much into Sabine. It is coming, guys, and those are some really good episodes once we do get there. And last but certainly not least, Dennis Lawson, exact same day also, September 27th. He plays the famous Wedge Antilles from the original trilogy, and don't forget, he also came back and played the same character in Rise of Skywalker. And I also added a little fun fact. I'm sure some of you fanboys already know this, but for those that don't, Ewan McGregor is actually his nephew.
Wow.
So,
yeah, no, I remember hearing this or reading this a while ago, but I have since forgotten. So this is a fun reminder that I forgot that Ewan is a legacy Star Wars actor, I guess, so to speak.
And speaking of Ewan McGregor, not to take the spotlight away from Dennis Lawson, Wedge, but have you seen those videos that I feel like they've just been getting posted nonstop lately where they're showing Ewan showing up for public appearances and he's just like totally still in Star Wars character. Like people are handing him stuff to get autographed and he's like, where's Hayden's signature? And they tell him, oh, it's right here, like check out the front of the item. And he's like, oh, is it okay because if I sign above him, because I want to make sure I have the high ground.
That's cool, man. I love that he's really fully embracing his popularity, I guess, so to speak. I mean, to be fair, I hadn't really. He's back on my radar because of the Kenobi series. Yes, I followed his career in other movies and other things that he's been in, but I haven't really paid that much attention on what he's like out amongst the fans until more recently. So maybe he has always embraced his Star Wars popularity, or maybe he hasn't. Maybe there was a resurgence for him. Who knows?
Yeah, and maybe it's due in part to where the prequels, will kind of had like a shade casted over them for so many years.
Yeah,
I'm sure that plays a big reason into it. Even though, even during that time, I would say, Ewan McGregor playing Obi-Wan Kenobi was probably the best, thing in the prequels, despite what everybody thought about them throughout the years. So him coming back to play Obi-Wan in the Kenobi series, which was phenomenal, by the way, as you guys have already heard us talk about a few months ago, even though that series was amazing. So maybe there is still a bit of a resurgence for him in that regard, and now he's just like truly owning it. I would.
Oh, of course. And all these little fan interactions and stuff that like you're making reference to, it leads me to believe that yes, he's fully on board for more episodes when and if that call gets made.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if that's it as far as birthdays go, last week we wanted to segue into talking a little bit about the new kid on the block, which is Andor, the new show on Disney Plus that's been dropping every week. But unfortunately, I did not see it last week, so I dropped the ball on that one, but that's okay because I studied hard, and I watched all 4 episodes leading up to it. And now I'm fully caught up and I'm ready to have this discussion. So Rolly, hit me.
All right, Pete. I mean, you kicked off this segment, but I'm just straight up going to ask to start off on, let's not talk the 4th episode just yet. Give me your thoughts on the first 3 episodes of Andor.
Okay, well, really good world building there, really good showing us a whole different side of it, and you were absolutely right, and it's basically, you mimicked exactly what most of the reviews are saying, which is this is a completely different feeling Star Wars entity that lives within the universe that we've come to know and love all these years. It does feel completely different with just enough little things tying it back to it, like certain sound effects and certain, obviously, walking amongst alien looking creatures and spaceships and whatnot, but a lot of it takes place on the ground. And that's what I really liked about Rogue One more than anything, was that it was definitely a boots on the ground kind of movie. Very little of it took place in a spaceship up in space. A lot of it was just exactly what happens while the heroes we know and love are up there fighting the Death Stars and fighting the TIE fighters and whatnot. What is happening down on the ground with the rebels, with the Rebel Alliance? So this was basically more of that, and I freaking loved it. I don't know if anybody has any negative thoughts about it because it's too slow or it's too, it's not my Star Wars or whatever. It's like, come on, man. I was hearing the exact polar opposite complaints during the Kenobi series, during those weeks leading up to it and during it, which is there's no world building and it seems rushed and it's going too fast, and like here we go 3 months later and it's the exact opposite. It's like it's too slow. It's like, come on, man. there's no pleasing you, some of you.
Yeah, you can't appease the internet, basically what it comes down to. But right. Surprisingly, and maybe it's because I don't go looking for bad reviews, but I know when I saw the first 3 episodes on this one, I was like, there's going to be these hardcore Star Wars fans that just flat out come out and say, this is not Star Wars. And right. Then you're going to have people maybe that have never seen Star Wars, and this is the first thing they watch, and they're just going to be blown away. It's like, wait a minute, this is like something maybe I should be watching it on HBO. It just has that kind of like tone and feel to it. I know last week I told you guys when I, like in the first like 5 to 10 minutes, I was like, am I watching Blade Runner or am I watching Star Wars? Because it just has a totally different tone from what Star Wars is. And before we get into episode 4, which does have more of a Star Wars vibe, but very much still in this world that we've now set up in the first 3 episodes of Andor, I was talking to some friends about it, and I'm just like totally, don't get me wrong, the series is not done. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but this early footprint that we're getting for what this series is going to be over these next 2 seasons, I'm just like stoked, because I feel like this is going to change the game for Star Wars going forward. And I mean that in 2 regards. I think that this series, again, I'm going to make a bold prediction here. I think that this series is going to end up being the best Star Wars product that has ever been made. Let's leave it at live action, right? Wow. I really don't want to mix animated with this. I think live action wise, I've never seen anything of production value that this show has. I've never seen the world building that this show has, character development, and we're just in 4 episodes, guys. I think that this series is going to be such a smashing success that the creative freedom that I've wanted to see in Star Wars is going to be a constant going forward. And I think you're going to get more of a Marvel, and when I say this, I mean in the creative freedom, I think you're going to get more of a Marvel system set up to where whoever's brought in, it's going to be something to the extent of like, yes, this is the Star Wars universe. We want to make sure we keep plot in place, but we are certainly not going to limit to what the directors want to do. And I feel like Rian Johnson tried to do that with The Last Jedi, got criticized, and Lucasfilm got scared because of it and reverted. But I feel like this show could just like completely break through that barrier of creative freedom that Star Wars fans fear. and really open it up to allow this to happen going forward, just because I feel that this show is going to be such a smashing success. Wow. So that's my bold prediction. I hope it comes true, because if they're able to break through that barrier, we're going to see a side of Star Wars that is completely fresh and brand new to everybody, old fans, new fans, everybody. I think it's going to be awesome. I'm really excited to see what happens after Andor.
Yeah, you sound like it, man. It sounds you sound like you're really hyped about it, as well you should be, because it was like the first 4 episodes. They really tied it together. I love that we keep flashing back to Andor's as when he's a little kid or early preteen or whatever age group he is, and I really like that his background is was kind of a, I guess, lack of a better term, like a Native American kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? It was not primitive. That's not the word, but you know what I mean.
Native inhabitant.
Yes, of whatever planet that was. They were closer in line with a what you would know as typically a Native American kind of a tribe for whatever, not species, but whatever planet he was from. So I'm very intrigued. Those little snippets that I keep getting cut back to show him and his sister, and just what led up to when we meet him. He's basically looking for his sister. He's looking for, that's all we know. Where he's looking for his sister, he's asking too many questions, and he's giving away too much of his backstory. That's basically what the character of Cassian Andor that we met in Rogue One was, a lot more refined, as far as knowing that he's a spy and knowing that he needs to keep his mouth shut and keep quiet, and there's certain things that you can't talk about in public and whatnot. But this one that we met, which is set 5 years before Rogue One, I believe is what they said.
Yeah. Yes.
He still hasn't been fully polished and fully refined, and that's because he's just barely meeting the people that are molding him to be the character that we meet in Rogue One.
Yeah, and I know we're spending a bit of time here analyzing episodes 1 through 3. I do want to get into episode 4, because I got so excited to watch that progress. I don't know about you, man, but I love the Lothal and Mon Mothma characters. Lothal obviously is a brand new character. He's a rebel recruiter, but in episode 4 we learn he's playing a big role with Mon Mothma. Mm-hmm. I love the Mon Mothma character, because I feel that character, when we see her in the original trilogy, she's a Rebel Alliance leader. Like, she's one of the main people, but you don't actually know anything about her or know exactly what she's done to get to that level.
Right.
And I like it. Her character is heavily featured in this 4th episode, and you just see, everything she's putting at risk in her life to start this rebellion. And I'm excited to see how that character progresses going forward, because clearly this is going to be a very, very high stakes show. I think we always got that vibe when we watch Rogue One from beginning to end. You're on the edge of your seat. You know what's going to happen at the end. Right. But nonetheless, they did a hell of a job making sure you were on the edge of your seat nonetheless. And it's going to be the same vibe in this show. And speaking of high stakes, I loved how we got a different perspective of what Coruscant is in this show, because I hate to use this word on this show, but I don't know how better to describe it. I feel like I was watching like Nazi occupied Germany, but in the Star Wars universe on Coruscant, which obviously the Empire's taken over, and they're just like spying on everybody, when it comes down to how they kept changing Mon Mothma's driver, and she was, she knew she was being spied on. Like, it's just so dark and so eerie. I love it. It's intense. Two big takeaways for me. I love that gallery scene, because I didn't expect we were going to get Easter eggs in Andor. And to be honest, when I was watching that scene, I didn't even see any of them, because I was so focused on the conversations between Lothal and Mon Mothma. But basically, Lothal is leading a second life. He's a rebel recruiter, but he's an art dealer, so to say. Yeah. An art/artifact dealer on Coruscant. That's his cover. And when Mon Mothma goes to visit him to talk about rebel issues, of course they have to put on this front to make sure that if they're being spied on, that the Empire doesn't pick up on what they're actually doing. Right. And she goes to visit him at his shop, And as they're talking and looking throughout the gallery, you see all these Easter eggs from like every piece of Star Wars entity in there. And just to kind of point some of these out in case you guys missed them. We see the chest plate for Beskar armor. That was a really cool one. A really cool one that I loved was they showed a Twi'lek Calicori, which we get into in a future episode, but it's basically kind of like a family heirloom that you see that the Twi'leks have in Rebels, to be specific. That was kind of the only place we ever saw it. For you gamers out there, there was actually a version of Starkiller's armor from The Force Unleashed, which I'm sure a lot of people got hyped to see.
Yes.
I believe on one of Luthen's shelves, they showed both Jedi and Sith holocrons. Again, something we've seen in Rebels. A really cool Easter egg. This one was kind of obvious. It was front and center. They actually showed Indiana Jones's whip encased in carbonite.
I missed that one completely. Like, I'm reading it here and I'm like, what? How did I miss that? Like, seriously, I didn't see that one.
Yeah, believe me, I didn't. I had to go back and see this after people were talking about it online. I don't pay attention to those fine details. I mean, if I was working for the Empire, everything would get by me in the Star Wars universe. And then we saw a couple other cool things. We saw Plo Koon's mask, which he wears to breathe on most planet surfaces. And then the one that I absolutely loved when I saw it, and I was like, what? They actually showed that and I missed it. They showed stone tablets from the Mortis arc in Clone Wars, which don't want to talk too much on that because we get into it in Rebels later, but basically that's the representation of the father, the son, and the daughter.
Oh, that's right.
As far as the Force is concerned.
Yes. Okay. I'll look it up again off when we're done here. But yes, now once you say that did remind me of that. So you have that listed next, and I was going to point that out had you not listed it. One of the things that I noticed, that first thing I saw was, we've seen so many different branches of the Empire's military divisions, but this is one of the first times that I remember in any live action of seeing the naval side of it. It's more like if the Empire, if the ones we're used to is the army, then there's also a navy, and their suits are very, very significant. So once I saw some of those naval officers, is what I'm going to call them, in their white coats with the red and blue, the ranking military medals or whatnot.
Yes.
The first thing I thought of was like, okay, he's coming, because that's what he wears. And I'm of course talking about Thrawn. I truly hope that we catch a glimpse of him in this series. What do you think?
So I wrote that down, right? Because I'm thinking we're not going to necessarily get everything we want to in Andor. But after I saw this scene where they're talking about art and all these artifacts, how can you not think of Thrawn? And for any of the viewers out there, listeners, that are watching Rebels along with us, I know you haven't seen Thrawn, but just to kind of give you a hint into something that's very, very Thrawn specific only, is that Thrawn is a collector of art, and he collects art for the sole purpose, or maybe he appreciates it, so I can't say sole purpose, but a big reason why he collects art is because he analyzes people and cultures from it, and he derives, strategy and what are people's next moves based off of art pieces. Right. So when we get this scene in Luthen's gallery, aside from what Pete is talking about, how we're being introduced now to high-ranking Imperials, it is a strong possibility, I think, that we could get Thrawn in this show. The time setting is correct for Thrawn. Thrawn is for sure going to be a slam dunk feature in the Ahsoka show. So if we get a taste of him in this series, man, I would totally be pumped. I just feel like the setting's perfect to see him.
Well, I was already pumped just seeing like his regalia that he wears on other characters without even seeing that character himself. And I'm like, yes, he's coming. But I was super excited about that. Okay, so if that closes up our Andor discussion, I guess we're going to be handling it like we did Kenobi. So we're going to try and watch them as they come out, and then we'll talk about them on the next episode. And this series is 12 episodes this season, and if I'm not mistaken, is that correct? 12 episodes? That sounds right. Yeah,
it's going to be 12 and 12, so 24 total episodes between two seasons.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, we'll be discussing it briefly, just like we did a few weeks ago with Obi-Wan Kenobi. So if that closes that part, then Rolly, why don't you hit me with a synopsis of this week's episode?
Okay, so in this week's episode, while on a mission to rendezvous with a courier holding secret information, Sabine encounters someone from her past, a bounty hunter named Ketsu. But is she a friend or a foe?
Excellent. So yeah, like you said earlier, this was a Sabine Wren-centric episode. It was basically all about her, and it was one of those bottle episodes, like I like to call them, which they take one character and they kind of pad a story that is specific, a side mission, so to speak, which is exactly what it was, because the episode starts as Hera is assigning a mission to some of the Phoenix Squadron members while having a special mission she is specifically assigning to Sabine. She asks Sabine to transport a courier which has secret information to Havoc Outpost. Ezra, who's wanting to tag along always whenever something having to do with Sabine, is assigned as backup along with Chopper by Hera. However, Hera specifically tells him that Sabine is in charge, and on their walk to the transport, Sabine encounters some graffiti on a wall, similar to her painting style. It's kind of like Art Deco meets graffiti, so to speak, like tagging, that she finds very familiar. And Ezra asks about it, but Sabine tells him it's nothing, just kind of waves him off. But as we know, just based on the fact that she lingered there and she had that puzzled look on her face, it's definitely not nothing, it's definitely something. So take it from there, Roland.
Yeah, so Ezra and Sabine are basically on their way to the transport shuttle area because they're awaiting a courier. But Hera doesn't really give them too much information as to who they are, what they look like, because she herself doesn't know. I mean, we're dealing with the rebellion here, so everybody's on a need-to-know basis, and apparently in this situation, that includes Hera.
Yeah.
So all Hera knows is that there's a code they're supposed to use. And what's funny is she plays the code like from an electronic piece, and it's not like, it almost sounds like droid language, but I guess that translates to it's a long way to Alderaan, because when they get to the area, they're like, let's just start saying this phrase to anybody and everybody that passes by. Right. Which ended up being like a really funny scene. So of course, all the individuals that are arriving off these shuttles, they start saying it's a long way to Alderaan, and I think Ezra even like says it in so many different ways. And of course, everybody's just blowing them off, like, what's these weirdos deal? Like, why are they telling us this? So finally, like, everybody, I guess they're there for quite a bit of time, because at a certain point, everybody has gotten off the transport shuttles and nobody's left. So they're like, well, you know, there must be an issue. So Ezra kind of like sits on what he perceives to be a box, which is not. It's actually an EG6 power droid, which a lot of people know as a gonk droid. And he says the phrase again because Sabine says, are you sure you were saying it right? So he tells her how he was saying it. And when he says it, the gonk droid kind of powers on and responds. Mm-hmm. So they realize, well, wait a minute, the courier wasn't actually a person. It was this gonk droid. Yeah. And Ezra tells Sabine that he doesn't get why they'd hide such important information in this binary box brain. And Sabine responds and asks Ezra if he would suspect that thing of being a spy full of secrets, and Ezra responds, no, he got a good point. I would never suspect that. And as he says that, he's interrupted by a bounty hunter exclaiming, well, that's too bad, because I certainly would. And Sabine immediately recognizes the voice of the bounty hunter to be her longtime friend, Ketsu Onyo, who she knows from the past, and we're gonna get to know a bit more here. So Ezra goes, so Sabine, how do you know her? And Ketsu responds, she never told you how we broke out of the Imperial Academy? And Sabine responds, that was a long time ago, before you got greedy and left me for dead. Ketsu tells her, you'd have been better off dead than joining this band of rebels. I didn't believe it until I saw the Empire put a bounty on you. And Sabine goes, are you going to try to collect on it? And Ketsu says, haven't decided yet. Besides, I work for the Black Sun now, and I have another job to finish first. And Sabine responds, I can't let you do that. And this was a cool reference to the Black Sun. We get a bit of taste of the Black Sun in Clone Wars. They're one of the major crime factions that ends up partnering with Darth Maul when Darth Maul creates, I forget the official term of the overall larger faction he creates, but he basically joins a bunch of these when he's the leader of the criminal underworld, and Black Sun was one of the heavy hitters in that crime syndicate. So that was a cool throwback to that, I thought. So sure enough, Sabine and Ketsu go into a standoff because Ketsu's after the courier for her own dealings, as well as Sabine and Ezra to help the rebellion cause. Mm-hmm. So during their standoff, Sabine and Ketsu are interrupted by patrolling stormtroopers, and the stormtroopers begin to question why they are out past curfew. Ketsu immediately opens fire on the troopers, leading her and the rebels to have a shootout with the troopers. Ezra provides cover fire for Sabine, Chopper, and the Gonk droid to board the shuttle and escape. And as the shuttle is departing, Ezra is knocked off of the shuttle and immediately contacts Hera. And Ezra tells her, Hera, the mission's gotten complicated. And Hera responds, I thought you were keeping a low profile. And Ezra goes, yeah, well, it just went high profile. So Ezra at that point is able to steal a second shuttle while Ketsu is still fighting off the stormtroopers. And after she successfully defeats them, she boards her ship and immediately proceeds to track down Sabine's shuttle to catch up to her and get a hold of the droid that she was also after.
Right.
So once she catches up to Sabine's stolen shuttle, she begins to fire on it right before Sabine can jump to hyperspace and get away and get to the rendezvous point that she intended to get to. And she immediately knocks out the hyperdrive, and Sabine's shuttle is left vulnerable to Ketsu's attack as she proceeds to blast open the hatch, causing the vacuum of space to begin pulling out the droids and Sabine. Chopper is launched into space while Sabine manages to lock down the emergency hatch and prevent her and the Gonk droid from being sucked out of the shuttle. After that, Sabine calls Ketsu on comms as the ships go face to face during the conversation. And Ketsu says, no hard feelings, Sabine. It's not personal. It's just business. Nice little Godfather reference there. Yeah. And she goes, and speaking of business, here's the deal. Toss out the power droid and I'll let you live. And Sabine responds, and if I refuse? Ketsu says, I'll blow up the shuttle and scoop my bounty from the debris. As Ketsu's saying this, Sabine proceeds to see that Chopper actually survived. And he's externally boarding Ketsu's shuttle so that he can, start sabotaging it. And Sabine, when she sees Chopper, she says, I don't believe it. And Ketsu goes, you better believe it. I'll do whatever it takes to complete my mission. And Sabine goes, no, I don't believe you can do it. And Ketsu says, maybe that's true, but I've changed more than you realize. I have new loyalties now. And as she's saying this, Chopper, of course, begins to proceed to sabotage the cannons of Ketsu's ship as Sabine distracts her, because he knows that the next move is that Ketsu's going to finish off the ship and take the droid from the debris.
Right.
And Sabine goes, right, finally part of Black Sun. Ketsu says, just like we always dreamed, I got the best weapons, best ship, and I'm feared across the galaxy. Sabine says, ugh, I can't believe I ever wanted that. The Black Sun are slavers and assassins who don't care about anything but body counts and quotas. They'd kill you too for a profit. Ketsu goes, speaking of which, your time is up. Now hand over the droid. And Sabine goes, you can't do it. And Ketsu says, I really wish it hadn't come to this, old friend. So after she tells her this, Ketsu attempts to open fire on the shuttle, but the cannons don't fire. And Chopper reveals to her what he has done is done. He escapes with Chopper following. And as Chopper is close to boarding the shuttle, he begins to immediately get pulled back to Ketsu with the tractor beam, unsuccessfully reuniting him with Sabine. And the Gonk droid goes to the cockpit and tells Sabine of what's happening with Chopper, and Sabine realizes she has to go back and negotiate with her old friend to get him back.
Right.
So as Sabine now is back face to face with Ketsu on the ship, she tells her, all right, Ketsu, let's make a trade. And Ketsu says, I'll extend the docking ramp and get your little friend ready. And Ketsu looks to Chopper and tells him, I had a feeling she wouldn't leave you. She was always soft. Try anything and I'll disintegrate you. I love how disintegration is a thing in the Star Wars universe, just FYI. And it was funny because this kind of reminded me, when we first saw, I think it was the first season of The Mandalorian. I always remember that part in Empire Strikes Back when Darth Vader hires all the bounty hunters, and he specifically looks at Boba Fett and tells him, no disintegration. And you never saw that in the original trilogy, but once Din Djarin comes out in The Mandalorian, he has his original rifle. Right. I don't remember who he's shooting at, but sure enough, they get disintegrated. And I was like, oh shit, that is a thing.
Yeah. Good callback.
Yeah, so here Ketsu's sure enough threatening Chopper with the exact same type of execution. So the docking ramp extends, the ship's dock, and Ketsu and Sabine approach each other on the ramp. And Ketsu's walking with Chopper, but she notices that Sabine is not walking with the Gonk droid. So Ketsu tells her, well, while I've changed, it seems you haven't changed at all. You're not giving up the courier, are you? And Sabine tells her, nope, you're going to have to take him from me. And Ketsu says, and this astromech? Not very smart, sticking your neck out for it. And Sabine tells her, Chopper's more than a droid. He's a rebel and a friend. And Ketsu says, oh, Sabine, we were once friends. Tell you what, give me the power droid and I'll share my cut with you, like the old days. And Sabine says, I don't do things just for money anymore. And Ketsu goes, that's right. Now there's, quote unquote, the cause. You really think your little rebel group can overthrow the Empire? Grow up, little sister. You can't be that foolish. And Sabine tells her, once we were like sisters, but we only cared about ourselves. And Ketsu responds and says, it's called survival. You, of all people, should know you can't trust anyone. And that's foreshadowing for something in the future. Just FYI, guys. Mm-hmm. And Sabine responds, I forgive you. And Ketsu goes, for what? Sabine says, for leaving me for dead. And I still trust you. Ketsu says, and you're wrong for doing so. And Sabine says, I met people who gave me a second chance in life, and that's what I'm giving you. Sabine and Ketsu's conversation at that point is interrupted by the Empire, who have shown up because of all this disturbance that's being caused, I guess, in a restricted zone. Oh, also because I'm sure they got a distress call from the stormtroopers after what happened on the ground. And the Empire is now threatening to board the stolen shuttle. And Sabine and Ketsu both immediately realize that they're going to have to work together. And Sabine says, looks like we're friends again. And Ketsu says, don't have much of a choice. So as the Imperials prepare to board the shuttle, Ketsu explains to Sabine that thanks to Chopper, she has no weapons on her ship. And that as long as they're docked to the shuttle, they can't use the ship's hyperdrive to escape. So Sabine, immediately being this explosives extraordinaire, of course, has a plan involving explosives. Yep. She tells Chopper to overload the hyperdrive on the shuttle. And at that point, you can kind of get an idea of what she's going to do. She explains to Ketsu that her plan is to blow up the shuttle to give them the time they need to escape on the Shadowcaster, which is the name of Ketsu's ship, by the way. And Ketsu gives Sabine explosives to give the shuttle a bit of extra kick on the explosion. So I think this is going to basically cause like some type of physical diversion to where it's going to allow them a small window of opportunity to escape from the Empire. So Sabine sets the explosives to the shuttle and wakes up the captain to inform him that the shuttle is under attack and he needs to engage emergency protocols. And I didn't mention the captain of the shuttle earlier like I should have, but I like making this shout out to this specific droid. This is the Rex droid from Star Tours and from Galaxy's Edge, DJ Rex.
Yeah.
I believe it's also still voiced at this point by Paul Rubens.
That's what I thought. I did think that, but I didn't double check to make sure.
Yeah, and then Disney Plus always cuts me off like in the credits, like right before they put the names, which the names are only on screen for like a split second. It like makes a small box and it's like, do you want to go on to the next episode? So I'm like, so I want to play the game of trying to catch it over and over again. And I was like, it's Paul Rubens. Who else? Yeah. It sounded exactly like him. So we're going to say that it was. So after she tells the DJ Rex, or rather, excuse me, Captain Rex, that the ship attempts to engage thrusters and leave as per the emergency protocols, and the Imperials begin to fire upon the ship. And it's at that moment that Sabine's trying to get over to the Shadowcaster now that the transport shuttle is going to take care of itself. Whenever the Imperials start opening fire on her, she also gets knocked out from the blast.
Right.
So Ketsu's ready to go. Her and Chopper and the Gonk droid, they're on the other ship now. Ketsu orders Chopper to disengage the docking ramp, but he refuses as Sabine is not on board. After Ketsu sees that Sabine is out cold, she kind of makes like an unexpected move, and she goes to rescue her before the Shadowcaster flees. And as the Shadowcaster is about to flee, the Imperial cruiser engages the tractor beam on both ships, preventing their escape. So the explosives that Sabine set on the transport shuttle, they go off shortly after this, and that blast basically damages the Imperial cruiser a bit, and it also breaks a hold of the tractor beam that it has on both ships. Mm-hmm. So this allows the Shadowcaster to go into hyperspace and escape. So I thought that was like a really cool part because, again, like I said, we've seen heavy resistance from the former friendship that Ketsu has with Sabine. Up until that point, she saw her old friend was helpless. She was going to die for all intents and purposes, and she didn't hesitate to go rescue her. So clearly, the friendship that she spoke so strongly against, did still exist.
Right.
So after they escape, they do go to the original rendezvous point, which ends up being Senator Organa's place. I don't remember if they say which planet it is, but basically they're supposed to get the courier to one of the head Rebel Alliance leaders. So the Shadowcaster arrives at the original rendezvous point, like I said, and Sabine is approached by R2-D2, and Sabine tells him that he can report to Senator Organa that his intel has arrived safe and sound. And there was like a cool little interaction again between Chopper and R2-D2 because they had come face to face in season 1. So I'd like to know exactly what Chopper is saying to R2-D2 because R2-D2 was always the droid with the attitude until these newer droids started showing up. So I want to know what Chopper is just saying. Like,
well, I don't think it was friendly because like his little arms came out and he was like, "Hey, what's up? What's up? Let's go." Yeah,
I always feel like I felt like it was like a one-up type situation, right? Yeah. You're like, "Remember me? Well, I'm out here doing work and you're just over here chilling." Something to that extent. But yeah, anytime the arms come out, he's talking shit.
Yeah, exactly.
So after that scene, now that they've gotten the Gonk droid to the rendezvous point, Ketsu takes Sabine and Chopper to rendezvous with our rebels, who we know as the Ghost Crew, where Ezra and Hera are waiting for them. So Ezra's talking to Hera, and Ezra goes, "So this is really happening. Last I saw these two, they were gonna shoot each other." And Hera goes, "If I'm not mistaken, when we first met you were stealing from us." And Ezra looks at her like he's gonna say something, but he's got nothing. Like he can't. He has no defense against that statement. So So Sabine and Ketsu approach them as they're getting off the ship, and Hera looks at Sabine and goes, "Congratulations on a successful mission." And Hera looks at Ketsu and says, "Thank you for helping our cause." And Ketsu says, "Well, it was mostly an accident. I'm not sure I'm ready for a full-on fight with the Empire just yet." And Hera says, "No one ever is." And Ezra responds, "I'm Ezra. We almost blasted each other earlier." And Ketsu says, "I know who you are. Sabine told me all about you." And Ezra, of course, gets Chifala and says, "She did? Well, what did she say? I mean, it was all good, right?" So Sabine kind of looks at Ezra and tells him to, "Let me have a serious moment here if you don't mind." So Ezra, goes off to the side because he knows Sabine is going to talk to Ketsu. And Sabine tells her, "You could have left me on that shuttle, taken the droids, and made a good profit." And Ketsu goes, "It's only money." And Sabine says, "Thank you." Ketsu says, "It must be nice to have people backing you up. I had that once when we were friends. Haven't had that since." And Sabine says, "Look, if you think you'd want to help us out, make a difference, just let us know." Ketsu says, "I'll think about it." And Sabine says, "That's a start." So Ketsu boards her shuttle, or her ship rather, and leaves. And Ezra approaches Sabine again and says, "Think that's the last we've seen of her?" And Sabine goes, "No, and I'm glad." And that's the end of the episode.
Right. So a nice little button ending right there. And it pretty much, we are introduced to a new character, and I'm forgetting right now if she does show up again, which that's a spoiler if she does, so I don't want to know. I'll look it up later. But I really like that we got just a little glimpse into Sabine's back history. Like, for instance, when it was said earlier in the episode, she mentions Imperial training. Like, I think if I didn't know that already, I had forgotten that Sabine was formerly a cadet, I guess, for the Empire. That did come up, right? That did come up in a previous episode.
I think it's more so a future episode. I think it was mentioned. Let me rephrase that. It was mentioned, but again, like I said, with one of the other comments, I don't remember exactly what was said. There is an inference to a future episode where we really are going to dig deeper into Sabine's, backstory. Why is she here with these rebels? Why is she quiet? Why does she not say much? And there's huge reasons for that, you guys. So it does obviously involve her having some form of attachment to the Empire before she did join the rebel cause. So right. I loved the episode. This was the first Sabine feature episode. It's easy for me to say I love every character on this show because it's true, but okay. I gain more appreciation for these characters individually because of episodes like these. So I enjoyed it. Yeah, more so than I thought I was going to enjoy it.
Right. No, me too. Like I said, these are what I like to call bottleneck episodes, but they're also side missions, however you want to call them. They just help. They're a small chapter and a quick peek at some backstory to these main rebel characters that we've come to know and love. So I appreciate these kind of little side mission episodes. So that brings us to the end of this episode of Rebels. So that also is bringing us to the end of Good Morning Lothal, the unofficial Star Wars Rebels podcast. It was fun to get back into the swing of things with you, Rolly. Anything else you'd like to add?
Just want to reiterate that statement, getting back into the swing of things, talking about Rebels. Again, like I said earlier in the episode, guys, the hiatus reminded me of why I love Rebels so much. It made me appreciate it a bit more. Mm-hmm. So looking forward to continuing this awesome season 2 of Rebels.
Right. So want to remind everybody again, like, share, subscribe, and rate as usual. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything, please, you know where to find us. Go and send us anything, any thoughts, anything you want to share with us. We are glad to hear from all of you. And so if nothing else, then the next episode, next week, we'll be talking about Season 2, Episode 9, and it's called Stealth Strike. But until then, when we see you again, this has been your host, Pete Salas, along with
Rolando Zamora,
saying, may the Force be with you always. Goodbye from Lothal.